So you've been watching Rick Santorum speak there in South Carolina after the campaign there for the Republican campaign. We'll cross now to the US Studies Centre, Brendon O'Connor. Brendon O'Connor, are you surprised that Rick Santorum vowed to fight on in Florida?
I don't think so. I think Newt Gingrich is likely to win today, and that suggests that people aren't in the Republican primaries that happy with Mitt Romney being coronated as the candidate. But Newt Gingrich has got so many problems and skeletons in his closet. Rick Santorum, who is someone who's got a more squeaky clean background in terms of his own private life, might think, well, it's worth me staying in because if there's a hunger out there for someone other than Mitt Romney, Ron Paul probably can't be that person, and I'm the last guy standing. I'm the other one of the four available choices. So I think Santorum probably thinks there's still some hope.
You mentioned Ron Paul there. Now, we saw him speak just a while ago. How much of a role has his campaign played in this Republican candidacy situation? Has it been more of a distraction?
Well, it probably brings out to vote some people who might not vote otherwise. So he wins amongst younger voters. That's really his constituency. Those who hear the words liberty and freedom and think maybe a bit more choice on things like drug use, who maybe think, well, I don't want to be drafted to a foreign war. He's got a lot of ex-veterans who come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and say, look, what we did overseas wasn't worth it. So Ron Paul probably drains maybe a little bit of the Romney vote, but I don't think he's draining from any particular candidate because probably people who wouldn't otherwise vote are being drawn to him.
It was interesting in Rick Santorum's speech. He made a very clear statement saying that he was not going to go negative and that he was going to provide a bold vision for the United States of America. And yet he took the opportunity to take several swipes at the president. What did you read into that?
Well, he's very much a nostalgia candidate. I mean, they're all claiming to be Ronald Reagan Republicans, but he's very much someone who's saying there's a kind of traditional America out there that people remembered and loved in the 1980s or maybe in the 1950s, and I can take you back to that time. I lived to those values. He's a Catholic with 7 children. He's someone who talks a lot about freedom, although he's opposed quite clearly to freedom of choice on abortion issues and even on contraception. He's personally opposed to contraception, believes states have the right to ban contraception in the United States. Views like that and his views on homosexuality, I think, will limit his campaign ultimately, but he does provide that kind of clean-cut conservative image, which I think keeps him in the race.
And he also mentioned guns and Bibles, which I would imagine in the United States would have a massive appeal.
Yeah, and that was very much a reference to Barack Obama's slip in some regards in the 2008 campaign. Obama was doing a fundraiser in San Francisco at an event he didn't realise was being taped. I suppose with smartphones even going back then, everything is on the record to some extent. He made a quip about people clinging to their guns and Bibles, and Santorum reminded the viewers today of that, saying, well, I'm that kind of candidate. I believe in clinging to your guns and your Bibles. So Santorum and I think all of the candidates are going to portray Obama as being out of touch, as being culturally out of touch, being out of touch to some extent with how hard some people are doing it, and the economy is Santorum's angle. But Obama is a bit of an elitist, as someone who's not really a real American. We'll hear a lot of that in the next 8-9 months.
Now, we know that Mitt Romney has a lot of financial firepower at his disposal to keep his campaign running. In terms of Santorum, what sort of resources does he have to stay in the race?
Well, he's running on the smell of an oily rag, I'd say, at this point. I mean, the Santorum campaign, that will be the biggest problem. The finances will dry up. He's not as personally wealthy as some of the other candidates. So I think that's really going to be a big problem for him. He's just really going to have to rely on debate performances. There'll be more debates in Florida. That's 10 days away, that primary. And he's got to hope that he can stick around for a few weeks, that he gets a few good results down south where some primaries will be held, particularly early March, and that Gingrich says something or something comes out for his campaign to implode in some way.
Now, you mentioned that Newt Gingrich has a lot of skeletons in the closet that could potentially harm his campaign. Some also say that, you know, the Washington insider can go both ways. What's your view on this?
Well, they're not just personal skeletons. Some people might want to talk about the first marriage, the second marriage, meeting his partner during the Clinton impeachment inquiries while he was having a relationship with his staffer. The same thing Bill Clinton, of course, was put on trial for in the US Congress. So those are one issues, but there's a lot of political skeletons as well. Gingrich led a pretty shambolic Republican Party in the late 1990s. Things really fell apart. There was a lot of infighting. He was seen as someone who was volatile, someone who never followed a script. So he's got a lot of enemies. Even in his own party, there's a lot of people who very much distrust and dislike Newt Gingrich, seen as a hypocrite. So he's just got so many negatives, but he performs. On given occasions like these debates recently, he can get his argument across, he can present himself fairly well. So we've got a very, I think, conflicted set of voters out there probably thinking, well, this guy probably sounds the best, Newt Gingrich, but really, is he electable in any way as a Republican president?
If Santorum, if his campaign falls over, where will his followers go? Which candidate?
I think the most obvious choice is Newt Gingrich. Gingrich has been sending out messages in the press and probably behind the scenes saying to Santorum, fold your candidacy, let's join together as a conservative force. Santorum voters, I think, will be drawn to Gingrich. Some of them won't turn up. Some of the really staunchly Christian conservative people, I don't think, probably would be able to vote for Gingrich, but that would be a minority. And maybe there'll be some wheeling and dealing over the next few weeks of Gingrich offering Santorum a possible running mate position. So that space will be pretty interesting to watch.
And Florida's coming up. What's your prediction on who's going to be successful there?
Well, Mitt Romney is well ahead in the polls, but a week ago he was well ahead in the polls in South Carolina. It looked like this was going to be a Romney, walk in the park in some regards. So Gingrich, I think, won't get quite the same conservative voter out in Florida. It's a more mixed population. I still think Romney is much more likely than Gingrich to win in Florida. But if Gingrich wins in Florida, then Romney is in incredible trouble. And this really is going to last for, not just weeks, but potentially for 2 or 3 months.
And Brendon O'Connor, who do you think will be facing off against President Obama?
I think Mitt Romney. He's the very most likely person to be against Obama. This has been volatile, this Republican race, for about the last 6 months because Republicans themselves are not that keen on Mitt Romney. He may look the part, he may have really strong credentials as a businessman, but he isn't someone they warm to. So they want an alternative, and they keep flirting with someone, be it a Perry 1 minute, even a Michelle Bachmann going back quite a while, but they can't quite bring themselves to support that person for more than a few weeks or a month. And so I think in the end, people will come back to Romney. He's really the only viable choice. Sense will prevail, but it won't be with great enthusiasm.
And we're just waiting on not Mitt Romney. We're waiting on Newt Gingrich to appear and speak to public in the aftermath of this primary in South Carolina. Do you think what's your reading of the situation there in the in Gingrich camp?
Well, I've got to be delighted. I mean, Newt Gingrich finished 5th in the New Hampshire primary. He was 4th in the Iowa caucuses. I mean, those are usually the positions of also-rans who drop out. These are not people, no one has ever finished that far behind and then gone on to win South Carolina. He'll be reminding the audience, or at least his supporters and staff will be, that since Ronald Reagan won the South Carolina primary in 1980, that person who won the Republican primary has always gone on to be the nominee. It's been the most important primary in terms of a predictor of the nominee, 100% success rate. So he'll be thinking that's what he's got ahead of him. I think things have changed.
Okay, Brendon O'Connor, stay with us. We're going to cross now to the Newt Gingrich camp.